Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am at Youngberg Hill in the Willamette Valley. I'm with Wayne Bailey, the wine grower here. Wayne, welcome, and tell us about Youngberg Hill.
Well, Youngberg Hill was established back in 1989. That's when the first vines were planted. And we have a 50-acre estate. We're organically and biodynamically farmed. And I can talk a little bit more about that biodynamics later, but it's basically taking care of your body homeopathically. We're taking care of the farm the same way. And then we also have, actually 23 acres planted on the 50-acre estate. We also have an inn that we operate somewhat like a bed and breakfast with 9 guest rooms. And we also have an event space that we do a lot of wine events and other things on the hill here.
Wow. And so tell us a little bit about where we are in the Willamette Valley.
We're in the McMinnville AVA, and that is just south and west of the town of McMinnville, which is the southern and westernmost area of the McMinnville or of the Willamette Valley. So we are, in fact, the closest to the ocean and also higher in altitude because we're right up against the coastal foothills. So we tend to get a little bit more of that marine influence. So we have cooler temperatures, a little bit more wind. We're typically the last ones to harvest in the Willamette Valley, which benefits us in terms of timing and getting scheduled of picking crews and stuff like that.
So of course, we're in the Willamette Valley, so I know we're in Pinot country and Chardonnay. Are there any other grapes that you're growing and working with?
Yeah, well, we grow Pinot Gris as well. But then in terms of things that we don't grow, I'm also purchasing fruit from Southern Oregon, both Grenache and Syrah, that we also make here.
And what is your total case production?
Around 3,000 cases a year.
Okay, so not too big, but no. Where can we find your wines? Are they in other markets or is it just direct to consumer?
Most of it's direct to consumer, although we are in Washington, as well as in Illinois and Missouri.
Interesting smattering of states.
Well, again, you got to remember I'm from the Midwest originally. I lived in Chicago for 17 years, so those two markets make sense from that standpoint.
Absolutely. So, as you just said, you're from the Midwest, originally from Iowa. What's your first memory relevant to wine?
When I was recruiting after going to college for mechanical engineering, going to San Francisco on a recruiting trip where my uncle lived. And we went to a restaurant at the top of the Bank of America building, which I can't remember the name of the restaurant now, but we had a bottle of Chateau Haut-Brion. And, as with most college students, you didn't really have fine wine back then. So that was the first wine that I had that not only was phenomenal, but didn't give me a headache. And that was my first epiphany in the wine world.
Well, I normally would ask, what was that epiphany wine that came after your first memory? But obviously,
you got both.
One of your first memories is a pretty good one and a pretty extraordinary wine. You then, I know we were talking and you said you collected wine and you've obviously drunk some of the great wines of the world, being first a Bordeaux collector and now being a Burgundy collector. Was there another exquisite aha moment that came at some point that either set you on a path, maybe what kind of triggered you to make wine, or is there another wine that stands out and has some sort of significance?
Yeah, that would have been when I was living in Burgundy. And as I think I mentioned before, prior to going to Burgundy, most of my exposure, like most of us, was California wines. And I was never a Chardonnay drinker. I didn't like the more voluptuous, hotter weather Chardonnay that tends to be more oak characteristics because they use a lot of new oak there. For very good reasons, but it just wasn't a style that I liked. Sure. So I just didn't drink it. I had, when I was in Burgundy, not too long after I'd been there, I had a 15-year-old bottle of Montrachet. And it was an OMG moment. And it was going like, oh, this is what Chardonnay is supposed to really be like. So that was my second epiphany, which was, now I love white wine too. You know?
And of course, you make a beautiful Chardonnay that I tasted today. I make a couple Chardonnays and in that same style. Yeah. And so now you've traveled the world and you lived in Burgundy. You've traveled abroad, lived abroad. Who do you think drinks the best in terms of quality?
Oh, I think everybody does. One thing that is great is that we all have, in every wine region, gotten so much better at how we grow the grapes and the quality of the fruit that we're getting out of the vineyards. That has meant that we're all making better wines, just because we have a higher quality product to work with. So whether it's in Italy or France or Spain or Chile, almost even I would jokingly say to my wife, even the Greeks are making better wine these days. Because I never met a Greek wine that I liked until recently. Everybody's making high quality wines. So I think we all drink extremely well. I think where we benefit, probably in the United States more than any other, is that in the United States we have access to all of those wines worldwide. Whereas you go to France, you're not going to see near as many American wines or Italian wines or Australian wines. But here we have access to all of them. So therefore, I'd say we probably drink the best.
We're pretty lucky.
Or variety-wise, anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I know that you were a Bordeaux collector, and I'm sure you have some great Bordeaux in your cellar, and you're a Burgundy collector. So I'm even afraid to ask what else is in your cellar, since you have some probably pretty extraordinary wines. But what else might we find if we were in your cellar?
You'll see a variety of things. I've got a lot of Tuscan wines as well. But quite frankly, it's more Burgundy and Bordeaux than anything else in terms of anything that's got age to it. I mean, I've got a lot of Willamette Valley Pinot Noirs as well, but just due to the nature of the business and everything else, I don't have as many older bottles as I do of the other two.
And is there anything in particular you opened recently from your cellar, whether it was one of the local wines or an older wine that gave you great pleasure?
I had a bottle of 2011 from the Givry-Charenton area that was really just delightful, that I had over the holidays, and that put a smile on my face.
So you live in Pinot country and Chard country. And you're surrounded by those grapes. Do you think that there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
For the Willamette Valley, I would say that it is Pinot and Chardonnay. Absolutely. We are blessed with growing conditions that vintage over vintage, even more so than in Burgundy, I would suggest, we have not a bad vintage. We will have better vintages and great vintages, but really never a bad vintage. And even the French would tell you there are times in Burgundy where things go bad. And so I would say, but it's definitely Pinot and Chardonnay. Mm-hmm. No doubt.
And that's for this area. Do you think in general there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No. I mean, they all have their own characteristics and loves. I would, 20 years ago, I might have said Cabernet Sauvignon. Mm-hmm. But quite frankly, now I know that I prefer blends, like a Bordeaux blend or even Chateauneuf du Pape blend, more than I do the single varietals.
Interesting. So, I'm sitting here in your tasting room and you have a wall with magazine covers and have received some great awards and recognition for your brand. So obviously wine scores have played a good part for you in your wines. What is your overall opinion about wine critics and scores?
Oh, you shouldn't ask that. No, that's the devil that you got to play with, I guess. It's always a crapshoot. They have a tough job because they are tasting so many wines, and so context, time of day, what they've eaten, there's so many things that go into that subjective rating, okay, that it makes it really tough and really variable. I think it's more a case of, as a consumer, not relying on that point score as being the end all. First of all, I always tell people, just because Parker gives it a 95, unless you know that your palate is identically the same as Parker's, you may not give it a 95. So, know that. But it's also knowing the wineries, knowing the winemaker, knowing what style they like to make is just as important as any point scores. And so that, and then the consistency year for year. I mean, it's one great thing to get a 95, but if you only get it 1 year out of 10, what's it worth?
Absolutely.
Really.
So you've given us a little insight into what you drink and what you collect and what's in your cellar. But if push came to shove, red, white, or rosé?
Red, white, or rosé in terms of what?
Of what you drink.
Oh, 90% of what I drink is red wine, is Pinot Noir, Burgundy. However, having said that, if you asked me if there was only one glass of wine that I could have before I died, what would that be? I'd say, give me a 20-year-old bottle of Chardonnay from Montrachet.
Very interesting. Well, we'll pick that one back up towards the end of this talk. But what about sparkling wine? Still or sparkling?
I prefer still. I'm much more drink that. For me, and this is it's always personal, I see sparkling wine as more of just a celebratory wine. So it's at the beginning before you have several wines, or it may be at the end as kind of a finisher. Although I did have an awakening when I was living in Burgundy, in that one of the favorite pairings that the French have with a steak is a good bottle of champagne. And we never in the United States think about having a sparkling as a wine pairing with steak. That's always, give me a big red, right?
Yeah.
They love it. And the fact is with the higher acidity that you have in the bubbles, cuts with the fat in the meat really well. And it really, really is a delightful pairing. We're just not familiar with it. But having said that, I would still rather have a good bottle of red.
Well, speaking of pairings, obviously champagne and steak is not what one would think about a typical pairing. How do you approach food and wine pairing? Do you generally follow rules of like white wine and fish, red wine and meat, or do you think out of the box and do odd pairings? And what have you found works for you?
What works for me is I'm more interested in the structure and the flavors and even the temperature of the wine in relationship to the food I'm pairing it with than I do about red or white. And in fact, I would say I break tradition with, red on red meat and white on fish and things like that more than most, because that means nothing to me. I'm much more interested in terms of how they're going to pair together, flavor-wise, texture-wise, structure-wise, and so on than anything else.
And so for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to taste your wines yet, what do you think they're missing out on?
Everything. Need I say more? No, and my first thought or first response would be, well, you've got New World wines that are made in the traditional Old World tradition. And so that's what you're missing out. The fact of the matter is most of your listeners probably are not really that familiar with the old traditional world wines, Burgundies. So they would say, well, what's that mean then? And what I would mean is that these wines are very, very well balanced in terms of their fruit flavors versus minerality versus savory characteristics, balance in terms of acid and tannins, and so that balance really creates a really nice, palate pleasing start. I would also say that our wines are very food friendly. They're intended to be food friendly. Part of that is the little higher acidity that you're always going to have, and both in red and white, that really pairs well and makes for a good pairing wine. And then the third is the ageability. As good as our wines are that you tasted earlier today, which was the 16s, they are today, they're going to be even better 20 years from now. And that's what I aspire to, again, because of my experience in Burgundy, is making a wine that is not just good today, but is going to be great tomorrow.
So if space aliens were to come and land on your property right now, we
have a landing pad for them. Did you see it out there? Yeah.
I was wondering what that was.
Right in there in the Natasha block. There you go, right?
And so if they were to land while we're sitting here right now, which of your wines would you want to present to them as sort of a welcome to Youngberg Hill?
Well, first I'd ask them if they prefer red or white. So that's a tough one. If I took vintage aside and just said, here's the best I got to offer you, I would probably, first of all, I'd go back to an older vintage. I'd go grab something out of the cellar, and it would probably be from our Jordan block. And I picked the Jordan block because I think traditionally, year over year, it has been the most ageable, and it's also been the most Burgundian-like in style. And when I say that, I don't mean it's Burgundian in terms of it, because you can't do that. But in terms of its balance, its earthiness, its fruit and balance characteristics, all those things just remind you a little bit more of if you were drinking a Burgundy. It's more in that style. So that's probably that I'd pop open for them.
And just to explain to everyone listening, the Jordan block is named after one of your daughters, and you have 3 daughters who each get their own block.
That's correct. We have Natasha, which is my oldest daughter, and then we have Jordan, who is my middle daughter, and they are both 2 of the blocks. The 2 oldest vines that are 30-year-old vines are named after them, and then Aspen is my youngest daughter, and the Chardonnay is labeled as after her. So
they have something to carry on.
Yes, and the wines are just as different as the daughters are.
So you've been here for a number of years, and you live on the property. This is your home, and you know these vineyards, and obviously the blocks. You know, you've connected with them in a different way by naming them after your daughters, and you know there's a connection to that. I'm sure you spend time in the vineyards, walking through them, and experience it. You call yourself a wine grower, and like in the French style, you are a grape grower. Tell me about when you're walking through the vineyard, what your connection is with the vines. Have you been known to talk to your grapes? Do they talk to you? Or, you know, is it more of what's the experience with your grapes? The relationship?
It's two things stand out to me in that question. One is that it's almost like a Zen moment. You're being one with nature, and so there's a peacefulness, there's a quietness, there's a intimacy that you have with nature in general, not just the vines, but the entire environment. That really, for your own well-being, is very healthful. The second is in walking through the vineyards, and I do that every morning. You get a sense of. It reminds me of, like, I try to spend time with each one of my daughters each week. And with their busy schedules and mine and everything, we actually have to allocate some time. And so, that hour or that evening that I have with them is just really focused on them. Well, I really try to do the same thing with the vineyard. So, one day I'll be walking in the Jordan block, for example, and really just spending time sensing it, feeling it, looking at each and every vine to see kind of where they're at. And I'm doing that all year long, so I'm doing it now during pruning to kind of see how those vines are pruning out, what the cane is like from last year's growth, and look at where vines are struggling, look at where vines are thriving, and what's the difference going on in there. So maybe I'll dig a hole in the soil to see what's going on in the soil that may cause those vines to be reacting differently. And so it's really taking the time, and that's the beauty of really focusing, being a wine grower, focusing on the growing of the grapes, and also my living here, in that I'm living, the house is in the vineyard. So it's easy for me to walk out the door in the morning and go visit the grapes and spend time there and really be intimate with them. And that experience and knowledge is, I believe, what allows me to grow, extremely high quality grapes, is that intimacy and that connection with each and every one of those vines. The vignerons, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before, but one of the vignerons in France once said to me, they said the best fertilizer that you can put on your vineyard is your footprints, and that resonated with me then because of my farm experience, and it really rings true to me now.
I like that thought. That's a really beautiful sentiment. So if you're spending all this time in your vineyards and you're intimate with the vines, you've been here for years now and you know what's going on, are there any signs or omen or predictors that you look for that will sort of determine what a vintage is going to give you?
No.
And when it comes to vintage, I know that the Willamette Valley, Oregon is a little more unpredictable when it comes to weather. But do you see, there's variation every year, and we know that, but do you see more things repeating themselves, or just each vintage is different?
Each vintage is definitely different. While we may, I did anyway, look at the 19 vintage, for example, and talk about how in many ways it was similar to 2010, and I love that vintage. It's still different. It's still unique. It's still its own vintage. And now seeing the fruit that's in the barrel, it absolutely is different. Will it have some similar style, characteristics, structure, and things as 2010? Yeah, I think so. And that's why I think I'm going to really like this vintage a lot. But it's still unique and different. Going back to your previous question, where you start to see the vineyard variation really start to come into hold in the fruit is at ripening time. So as much as we'll talk about when bud break occurred, when bloom occurred, and what's happening during the growing season, it's really from veraison on that really starts to make the difference in the variation from vintage to vintage, because it's the temperatures and it's the weather during that ripening time and how fast or how slow that ripening takes place that really defines that vintage.
So while you may not have any predictors of what Mother Nature is going to do in a given year, has your team here at the winery set up any good luck rituals that you do at the beginning of harvest? Any traditions that you guys honor, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end of harvest?
Well, my wife told me that I couldn't say that I dance naked in the vineyard, so I won't.
So we don't do that.
Not really. I mean, there isn't. I don't really believe in superstitions. I believe in being there, being attentive. I think there is a tendency for us as human beings to try to fix things, to try to correct things, to try to make things right as we see them. And I, over the years, have gone much more to asking if nature will play with me. Or actually, I'll correct that. How I can play best with nature. Not to feel like whatever nature brings to us, we've got to try to combat it or correct it in some way. Because we're never going to win that battle anyway. It's more that how can I benefit or play with the weather, with the environment, to again focus on making the best fruit possible. Not how it makes it more convenient for me farming, but how can it benefit making the best grape possible.
But and that makes perfect sense that you can't really change anything that's going to happen with harvest, but do you have any traditions of a first toast or opening up a great bottle of wine or a team dinner before harvest starts?
What we do in October, always every year, we do a harvest dinner. And it's more of just a celebration. It's kind of a celebration for the fact that, we've been farming these grapes for 9 months, practically. And all that work, and I always want to make it for those that attend, whether it's our team or wine club members or guests or whatever, that this is an agricultural product, and celebrating what the vintage has brought us that year. Celebrate what the Mother Earth has provided us this year. And whether we like that vintage or not because of the weather or whatever, it is what it is, and really celebrating that. So, yeah.
So before you were a grape grower and you grew up on a farm, what did you want to be when you grew up? I know you were an engineer and that's what you studied, but did you have other aspirations before that?
Not really. We grew up farming pigs and raising pigs and corn, farming corn mostly. And quite frankly, if it wouldn't have been for my dad insisting that I go to college, I would have stayed on the farm. I loved farming. Obviously, I still do because I'm back at it. But I loved it. I loved the life, and I loved growing up on the farm. So that was my aspiration. But my dad, in his wisdom, didn't want me to live the farm life and have to struggle like they did all their lives and everything. And so, he was insistent that I go to college and get a degree. So my second aspiration then became, well, if I'm going to go to college, I'm going to take engineering because I'm going to be a design engineer for John Deere to make farm equipment that we can goddamn work on, right? So that became my second aspiration. And then that mechanical engineering career evolved into 3 other careers in corporate America until I ended up consulting in the corporate world, focusing on wine and beverages. That took me to France. And even at that time, I did not have the aspiration to do what I'm doing today. It was only after going to Burgundy and spending time with the vignerons there and that orientation of we're farmers first, winemakers second, and then learning and living that life for a couple of years that I then had the epiphany, if you will, to say, I want to get back to being a farmer again.
It's so beautiful how it all came full circle, and yet all the experiences led to making this an even better experience.
Well, I mean, you got the farming background, engineering. I found that my mechanical engineering degree has done me well, regardless of what I've done in life, and it still helps me to this day with that. So that's been a benefit. My exposure in other aspects of the corporate world are beneficial. So yeah, they all kind of coalesce.
Yeah. So when you're not working, how do you spend your free time?
Working. This certainly isn't a retirement. It's not a hobby. It's a work life. But as my dad said, and also one of the French vignerons that I knew said, you never wake up in the morning thinking about having to go to work. You just wake up and you start living. And that's what I try to teach the girls, is do something where you wake up in the world and just start living. And you will then have the most satisfying life. And one that is that you're comfortable with, and so that's the aspiration from that standpoint.
That's a beautiful sentiment, because I normally ask the next question is, what's one piece of advice or a great piece of advice that you carry with you through life? And I think you might have shared it, unless there's another one.
I think that's it. And it's tough. Like when you're talking to your children and everything, do something that you have a passion for and everything. And of course, a 20-year-old doesn't have a clue what their passion is, right? Mm-hmm. It's only after years of experience doing different things that you find that passion, or you arrive at it, or you luck into it, whatever the case might be. I would say that I kind of lucked into this, because if I wouldn't have been consulting, if I wouldn't have got the consulting job in Burgundy, and then gotten over there and met some great vignerons that I love to this day, I wouldn't be where I am. So some of that's just dumb luck. Yeah. But my great advice to my children, and I would say to anybody, is expose yourself to a lot of different things. Unfortunately, I think I look at my 13-year-old today, and they're already saying, well, what track are you going to take in high school? What are you going to focus on? And my senior in high school, it's, well, what's going to be your study in college? They don't have a clue. And so I tell them, expose yourself to as many different things as you can, and then go with what sticks,
Yeah. So you have 3 daughters. You spend time with them. You're busy working and giving out really good advice. And you've got one off at college and one soon to go to college or go off into the real world, and then a young one at home. But I'm sure you eke out a night or two for a romantic evening with your wife. And I'm wondering what sort of wines get opened on a night like that.
Well, first of all, yes. Nicolette and I, we try to have a date night every week. And the rules we have are, we try to follow, are that we don't talk about work.
Okay.
And we don't talk about the girls.
Okay.
Now, obviously, that's going to happen. But we try to keep it more focused on being really a date night about her and I. Because not only do we live together, but we also work together.
Right.
And so it's important to keep that balance. So that's very important to us. The second thing is Nicolette prefers a little bit bigger reds. So I would say typically If we're not drinking an older Pinot Noir or Burgundy, we're going to be reaching for something that is a little bit bigger, and we like to spread the wealth. So it may be a Bordeaux, it may be a Cab from California, it may be an Italian red. Typically, it'll be red. But it'll be a little bit bigger red than the normal Pinot, just because that's what Nicolette used to be. Really a big Syrah fan, big Syrah fan. But I made a Grenache for her not too long ago that she just really fell in love with. So she's kind of spreading her wings a little bit too.
Well, since she made you spread your wings a little bit, because she made you make sparkling wine.
Yeah, well, she's got me making sparkling wine now. She's got me making rosé now. She's got me making Grenache and Syrahs now. So yeah, she's broadened my horizon quite a bit. So, which in one respect in two respects it's fun, because I always look at, and one of the things I love about wine growing is that every year is a new experience, and it's always a learning experience, because you're working with new product every year. And I love learning, and I love that learning experience. So that's great. The other thing is, in working with other varietals, you learn things. And you go, oh, well, this is how it worked with Syrah or Grenache. I wonder what this would be like if I tried this on Pinot. Yeah, and so it gives you a lot better appreciation for maybe what you are doing with Pinot, but also gives you a learning opportunity to try different things. So, for example, you might use American oak on a Syrah and feel very comfortable with that, and think, okay, well, what if I try it on a Pinot? And you go, okay, that didn't work. Okay, well, maybe it does. So it's all about learning and trial and error, and you're always experimenting with things.
So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
Well, that would have nothing to do with wine whatsoever, and that's that way back in my engineering years, I actually have 2 U.S. patents with the U.S. government. So now I don't own them because I was working for a corporate entity then. But still, I have those patents. So I'm proud of that.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So I'll take that one to the bank. Well, I won't take it to the bank because I don't. But anyway.
To the emotional bank.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So complete this sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Only having half a dinner.
So now I want you to imagine that dinner. It's a full table. But if there was a table, a dinner table that you could be at, and a bottle of your wine on it, who would you want your dinner guest to be? From any walk of life. Famous, not famous. Is there one person you wish to see a bottle of Youngberg Hill wine in their hand?
Well, there would be 2. The first one that comes to mind is Oprah. I want that Oprah bump just once, okay? But the other one would be an old Vigneron from Burgundy that has now passed away, that I worked with back in 1991, 92 when I was over there. That I would really love to have him see where we are. Yeah. And actually thinking about that brings up a third, and that would be Jimmy Brooks. Jimmy and I became fast friends when I first came out here, and we truly had a thing going. And he really helped me get started and focus on, we were both in the same mindset in terms of organic and biodynamic farming and everything. And he was just truly a great soul. And so knowing that he was with me in the beginning, and for him to see where we are today, I would love to be able to share that with him.
I love that. So where do you think we're going to be in, 300, 500 years' time? Where do you think we're going? You think we'll still be drinking wine?
Yes, because they've been drinking wine for thousands of years. We have been drinking wine for thousands of years. Maybe not quite the same kind of wine, but I mean, they're showing. In fact, I'm reading a book right now on showing evidence that there was wines that were drank at least 10,000 years ago, if not older than that.
Wow.
And I think we don't even know all that history yet. So I would say absolutely. So, maybe different, but who knows?
Well, if that weren't the case and you were having to go off to a deserted island, which 3 wines would you take with you?
I would take a 20-year-old Chardonnay from Montrachet.
Of course.
I would take a bottle of Burgundy from... Probably a little bit younger, probably about a 15-year-old bottle from the Givry-Chavanton area. And then I would take a bottle of Youngberg Hill.
Which one?
Well, there is, it would definitely be an older vintage. I'd probably take something from the 2010 or 11 vintage, probably.
So now we play a little game where we like to pair our wine with music in line with wine soundtrack. What you'd want to listen to, what it makes you think of, the kind of mood it puts you in. So going to your 20-year-old Montrachet, what would you want to be playing in the background while you drink that?
Are you thinking just genre, like...
Whatever you're comfortable with. If you're into a particular song, a musician, a genre... mood.
The first thing that comes out to me that I think about is smooth jazz. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I would be drinking with that. Yeah.
And what about the as we were tasting today, the 2016 J Block, the Jordan Pinot?
I would probably have to go with something from the Beatles, 1964. Off the Abbey Road album.
And the Natasha Pinot 2016?
Well, that one, I would probably grab something from Spice Girls. Okay? Because that's Natasha.
Yes, I guess the influence of your daughters plays into that.
It does play into it, yeah. Exactly.
And then the Aspen Chardonnay.
Oh, boy. I would have to... I get back to a little bit more Van Morrison.
And we're going to end on your sparkling wine.
Oh, got bubbles. Okay. That I would have to say, that's all about celebration to me, always. So, is it Shaka Khan that did Celebrate? I'm trying to think who did Celebrate. I know. I'm bad at that too.
I know the song. I won't sing it for anyone.
Okay, all right. Well, let's go with that. Okay.
Fantastic. Right. Celebrate good times.
Yeah, there you go.
So I have one more question for you, Wayne. You've had the privilege of traveling around the world and living in Burgundy and things people only dream about. But is there one place in the world that's at the top of your bucket list, one wine region that it's on the next place you want to go that you need to get to?
This is going to sound really weird, but I'm going to say China.
China?
Because it is a total unknown. And for me, again, being wanting to learn and everything, the big question in my mind is, can they really do what we do there? Huh. Or can they really do what they do in Burgundy or Bordeaux or Tuscany or Chile or Argentina? Can they really do it there? And there's a part of me that is like China's like California. Mm-hmm. It's, we can do everything there. And no, you can't. Okay, and so where are you going to hang your hat? So there's a huge amount of curiosity for me in terms of where China is and what the potential is and what really they can do. So yeah, so I'd say China.
Well, for those who, their aspiration is to come here to the Willamette Valley and to visit Youngberg Hill, how can they do that? How can they find you, and what can they do when they're here?
Well, the best thing to do is to get on the internet, as everyone does, and go to www.youngberg Hill, YOUNGBERG Hill.com, and you can get all the information there. With respect to what can you do here, it's great because not only do you have 120 wineries within a 20-minute drive of us, but we're only 45 minutes from the Pacific Ocean, so you can go to the beaches and enjoy a day there. We're only 2 hours away from skiing at Mount Hood, so if you want to do that for a day, you can do that. During any time of year, there's great hiking, there's great fishing. Fly fishing is great in the Rogue Valley and the Umpqua, as well as on the coast. And great hiking and throughout. Biking is a big thing here, and in fact, we've got one of the best biking routes in the Willamette Valley. It goes right by our driveway. McMinnville is got a lot of art galleries, so you got a lot to do there, as well as tasting rooms and great dining facilities. We're blessed with the fact that being in wine country, a lot of great restaurants and a lot of diversity in terms of restaurants. So you've got that to do. As well as in McMinnville, we have the Space and Aviation Museums, where the Spruce Goose of fame and glory is now housed. So if you want a respite or a day off from whining and dining and everything else, you can go to museums. So lots to do. Lots to do,
but if you want to sit back and relax and you want a full vineyard experience, you can book a room. You said you have 9 rooms here, so you can stay here at the bed and breakfast, have a beautiful home-cooked meal in the morning, look out at the vineyards, do a tasting. But if you just want to visit, do you need an appointment?
No. You can drive by and come on up. We have 2 tasting rooms. One is for anyone that wants to come up without an appointment and check us out. But then we also have a seated tasting experience in another area of the property where you can really sit down and get really much more intimate and close-up information on the wines, the vineyard, the winery, and so on. And those are by appointment. And then third, we have our new brand, the Bailey Family Wines, which is a step above the Youngberg Hill brand, where we also have tasting seated appointment seatings that you can really get at. And those are all done by myself. Oh. So you can really get up and close with the winemaker. So
if you want to taste Bailey with Wayne Bailey, then you can book that.
That's correct.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.